Make sure it's going. All right. Hey guys, how's it going? On this episode of Lore and Order, we're gonna be talking about Life is Strange, and as always, I'm Jack,
And I'm Anna.
and we're gonna be talking about the entire game. So if you haven't played Life is Strange, I would definitely recommend not listening to this because we're gonna talk about the ending and all the things that incorporate Life is Strange, the story. So more for a discussion based on what a wonderful game Life is Strange is. So where do you think we should start off, Anna? Do you have any ideas?
I say, I have opinions of basically how the game was released to begin with, how it was an episodic game, how it came out in 5 parts. The first episode was free. They give you a little taste. And then, I just want to talk about episodic games because a lot of games are doing that now. Telltale is very infamous for that. And another game, Bendy and the Ink Machine, is also currently doing that. So I feel like just talking about that before we even dive really into the game be interesting. So for episodes 1 through 4, there was only like 2 months in between episodes.
Oh, really? Yeah.
When it initially came out, and the final episode was like 3 months later. So that one had a
Oh,
little
wow.
bit longer of a wait. So I find it interesting when games kind of do the episodic thing, just because you can give them a little bit of the story, like get them into it, and then all of a sudden like you have to wait, and like during that time
Yeah.
of waiting, you tell your friends about, oh man, I played this game, and I found it like really interesting, and I can't wait till the next part. Like you should play it, and then you kind of start this word of mouth like talking about it, and more people like maybe start playing it, and then you have more people talking about it. And I find games that do that really interesting just because it's such a gamble with it, because I'm
Yeah.
always afraid that like once you do it, there is a risk of people losing interest in your game.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
like if you wait too, like you want to have like just enough of a wait to get people like sitting on their edge of or edge of their seat, like waiting, like talking about it. But you make them wait too long, they're just going to get angry and not want to
Yeah.
play it, which is an issue I see with Bendy. However, like seeing that this game that was like 2 months in between, like you might think, oh, that's a pretty long wait, but it's better than like 5 months. And
Or 4 years
yeah.
for Attack on Titan's case.
Yeah, like you want to make sure that you when you wait, like it feels like it's worth it. Like Rick and Morty, since it's coming back tonight of when
Oh,
we're
boy.
recording this, like we had a really long wait, but then they gave us on April Fool's Day the first like
Yeah.
episode be like, hey guys, we're back. So I think
Yeah.
like when you do something like that, you kind of pique people's interest again, and then they start talking about it. So it kind of creates a nice buzz around the game, and also leads to a lot of interesting discussions while you're waiting. Because see, now this game came out in 2015. We have had a decent amount of time to like play the whole thing through, marathon it, and like talk about it. But so we missed the opportunity to play it where it's like episode 1. Now we wait.
Yeah.
What will happen? It's because that just makes you kind of start theorizing, kind of creating your own expectations for what the next chapter will be like. So I find
Right.
like when a game decides to go episodic, like it's a huge risk, and if you do it right, it's going to bring more and more people in to give them a really unique experience. Like when you watch a TV show, like now like with Netflix, when they drop an entire season at once, it doesn't really give you the time to kind of theorize or like what's going to happen next, which is, I mean, you can do that in between seasons, but for like from week to week or whenever the episodes are, like having that drive to kind of discuss and think about it makes you kind of appreciate the game a little more, because it becomes like a part of your daily conversation. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think the idea of episodes for gaming is actually really fascinating because it feels as it's definitely like a newer thing, and games in general, because everyone kind of consumes them with like different time periods. You have those who, well, I guess like a show you marathon it, or you have like 2 hours to play it. But I think what's interesting about Life is Strange is that the episodes do feel like episodes.
yeah.
So it's not like they're um, it's not like a game they just chopped up into episodes. It actually feels like with the whole kind of like memories and time travel thing, that they're segmented in a way that's like for example, when you saw Chloe in the wheelchair at the end of episode 3 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Like I said to myself, like, I would have immediately like bought the next episode. Like they have a way of really kind of um like they deliver good cliffhangers that make you want to play the next one. And every episode kind of has like it's a narrative structure, just like how a normal TV episode would go.
Yeah.
And I think that really helps. It really helps kind of like augment the type of game it is, because it's not. I've heard some people like in critique and say it's not really a game because you're just kind of like, making decisions. Like, you're not really like doing a whole lot, which
Right.
again, you could argue is like, there nothing really defines a game. Um, but I think it it's done probably the best I've ever like, or at least I can imagine, because I haven't done a lot of like episode based games, but I do think it's a very clever and successful idea in this case, just because like just releasing that first episode free, it's like it's genius, because I played it for, it's like, I don't know, maybe 2 hours if you kind of like look at everything and just take your time.
Right.
And I think that's a great way of saying like, it's I think it's the way Steam does their return things, is that if you play it for less than 2 hours, you can return a game, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which is like a perfect amount of time to think if you like a game or not. So, again, releasing the first episode for free like that is it's pretty genius in my mind.
Yeah, I just love the idea of an episodic game, because that's completely changed. If you do it right, it kind of changes how you will tell the story. Because, like you mentioned, the cliffhangers, like, it brings you on. It's like, oh man, I can't wait for the next one. And when it was coming out, yeah, like a 2 month, unless it was the last episode, like a 3 month wait. So you have that time to be like, oh man, like, what are you going to do? Like, you kind of go back and you look. It's like, okay, so these are the things that have happened. Like, how could that like really drastically change, like, where this is ending up? And I think knowing how people reacted to the ending of Life is Strange, where it was down to two choices: save Arcadia Bay or save Chloe. Like, people were kind of upset by that, which is understandable, because in this game you're pretty much going back to save her, and then you're like, okay, so like it has to end, like you have to clearly do something dramatic, because there's a huge storm, and like all those changes you've made have definitely done something. But then
Right.
having the choices of like Chloe or Arcadia Bay really kind of makes it, kind of neglects the first bit of the chapters. So I can understand why people would be upset by that, because you have, you're playing this chapter by chapter, you've created these relationship with these characters, you've waited a time in between, you're like reading up, you're replaying the chapter again maybe just to see if there's more, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, this ending. So
Yeah, and I think the part that kind of got a lot of people turned off by it is like, it all depends on whether or not you like Chloe as a character the same way everyone else does.
yeah.
Because essentially, like, there are people who didn't like Chloe, and that's fine. People like,
Yeah.
people have their opinions, but since the ending revolves around one character versus like Arcadia Bay, um, I think it kind of feels unfair to both sides, because it's like, if you spent the game like helping the people rather than helping Chloe, like if you were helping Katie instead of like hanging out with Chloe, it's like you've already kind of chosen your side, and then for the game to be like, oh, like, none of that really mattered in the
Yeah.
end, because you either have to kill them or you have to, well, actually, I don't know if like, is it implied that it like wiped out everyone, because don't you just kind of like drive away in the end?
Yeah, in the end, you're like driving through the town, and the entire town is destroyed. And when you go to the diner, and you get the picture to kind of go all the way back,
Yeah.
like, so like everyone's like hiding in those buildings to save themselves. And also when you're like walking through the street to get to the diner, you see dead people all over the place.
Oh yeah,
So
I don't think I noticed all of them.
yeah, there
To
was
be
a
honest.
lot of them, and so it is really heavily implied that this town is wiped out. Arcadia Bay is like off
Yeah.
the map at this point. So like,
Yeah.
I think like this is also a good transition to the bringing two choices. I think like hitting like these two, like the episodic and choice part of this game before we dive into like really looking into everything might help, just because these are the two things I focused on a lot when I was playing, how those design choices affected the rest of the
Yeah.
storytelling of it.
Yeah, definitely also compare like the major choices that we made, like the money situation
Yeah.
and like what was another one, like shooting Frank, I think was
Yeah.
one of them.
Shooting-
Things like that.
Yeah.
The-
So like when it came to choices in this game, like a lot of them didn't seem like that major, or it's kind of like in a Telltale game, like so and so will remember this. Like you kind of start creating relationships with people by the choices. Like, oh god, I forget her name. The one girl that you pretty much saved from being hit by literally everything she could possibly be
Oh
hit
yeah,
by.
the girl with glasses.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I remember. What's her name?
I'm so bad with character names.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, so like she
But-
kept getting like you would like see her get hit by something, you would rewind time and like be like, hey, watch out, or like just kind of put your arms on her and like move her over a foot. So like little choices like that kind of made like relationships with people, or like when you're talking to Kate and like when like you could tell something was up with her and like you tried your best to talk to her, and then she's on
Yeah.
top of the building about to jump and you're trying to talk her down from it, and it can either you can or you can't. And
Yeah.
like I find that like those choices really like minor ones like, oh, I'm just gonna Alyssa, I think her name was Alyssa.
I think that sounds about right. Yeah.
So like you're either helping her just like not get hit in the head with a football, or like something, but then you have a dramatic moment with Kate where
Yeah. Do you know if she ends up on the roof, like no matter what you choose?
I'm fairly certain she will always get on the roof, but once you
Yeah.
get up there, you can try your best to
You can talk her down.
Yeah, you can talk her down.
Yeah, because I saw like one thing where like, and that was like before I knew kind of how the game worked. But I saw like one playthrough or review or something where you could save her, and I was like, "You can save her? No, I can't." Like, because they take away your ability to rewind time, so it's so like
Yeah, you have to.
you feel like you messed up, and
Yeah.
it's not the only time I can think of like another like important kind of like suicide in the game was way back on the SNES. Like one of the Final Fantasy games had one where like this character like jumped off a cliff, but this is like 16-bit graphics kind of thing.
Right.
It's the first game I've played, I think, that I can think of where it's just like that was insane.
Oh yeah.
That kind of like powerful moment of like you have that choice. Like it's pretty daring for a game to do that.
Yeah,
Because I think
definitely.
for a lot of people that can kind of trigger them emotionally. But I think it's like the game's got a lot of guts for giving you that like that choice, and especially taking away your ability to rewind time, because it's like that would almost be kind of like downplaying it. It's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, you can just rewind if you mess up. It's like, no, you gotta make that choice right then and there. And that's great too, because it's almost like if you had chosen not to like talk to Kate and kind of like gravitate towards Chloe, it almost feels like taking away your time ability is like kind of your quote unquote punishment. It's
Right.
like, all right, you messed up, you didn't help her, now like we're gonna give you one more chance to talk her down.
Yeah.
But you can't actually like redo this, so choose your words carefully.
Yeah, I think.
Which sorry, just one more
Yeah.
little thing, but I think we should talk a bit also like how the choices can be a little bit frustrating, because there were moments where like I knew what I had to do and what kind of like response I had to get, like with Frank on the beach kind of thing, where it's like it was just kind of frustrating, like trying to get like the right playthrough to go on. But we'll talk about it in a sec, so
Yeah.
go ahead with what you're gonna say.
I was gonna say like when you couldn't like rewind time at that moment, the saver, like I don't remember if there was a proper like kind of story element of why she couldn't rewind time? Was it because like she had been doing it so much and it was like
I
taking a toll
yeah
on her at that point?
yeah like right as she went on the roof, or right when everyone was like gathered around the school and she was on the roof, she like did she did a time freeze, I
Right,
think by
yeah.
accident, and that probably
Like
like
destroyed her.
that probably used up her power, and then when she went to the top of the roof it like unfroze, I think. So she was able to get there before Kate jumped, and then the power wore off and she just couldn't rewind time because she had like literally frozen time,
Yeah,
which was
that's
really
right.
cool. I think that was the only time that ever happened,
Yeah.
if I remember right.
I think they
But
should
yeah,
have had a couple of moments that incorporated something like that,
mm-hmm.
where because you are using your power a lot. Well, depending on what kind of person you are, because with some conversations, you can just like say something and you're like, "Wow, you're an idiot." So you just
Yeah,
rewind time. You remember what they said, so you say it back to them to be like, "Wow, you really know stuff," and you're like
yeah,
abusing your power at that way.
mm-hmm.
So it would have been really
Yeah,
interesting if they had something where like how much you use your rewind ability to like maybe affect like really key moments in the game,
yeah,
because then it would have felt like more of your choices mattered, even the choice to rewind time. And I
mm-hmm.
found that in this game, like it really does do like the illusion of choice where you think your choices super matter, and then a lot of times they don't.
Yeah,
Like they don't really amount to anything. Like with Kate and Frank, those were like kind of really some of the only key like choice moments in this
yeah,
game, because you either like choose to, or you do the right thing and you, or say the right thing and you save Kate, or you end up like hurting, or I think it might be even like you hurt or like not hurt Frank, and like if you don't hurt
yeah.
Frank, he comes back and like he's helpful for you.
Yeah, I think because the first option is when he like confronts you in the junkyard, and you can either choose to shoot him or not shoot him.
Right.
Which I chose to not shoot him.
Yeah, same.
Obviously, because like I always chose the safe route. Because like the thing about the some of the choices is like when it comes down to the main one, where it's just like the screen goes like all like red, and it's like, oh, here's one choice and here's the other. That's a major choice.
Yeah.
For some of them, like it felt kind of like you knew what was going to happen if you chose one. Like the part where you had to choose to take the money for the like the handicap fund in the school to pay
Yeah.
off like Chloe's debts. Like really, like if you chose to take the money, like do you really think that was gonna like you knew what was gonna happen?
Yeah. Exactly.
Like kind of you could guess if like obviously taking that money was not gonna turn out well, because it's kind of a moral decision, and obviously I chose not to. And
Yeah. Same.
Chloe, and then which is weird because Chloe kind of like plays it off like it's just like
Yeah. No, that's fair.
um yeah, which is fine. But I do think, going back to the minor choices, thinking back to it, even though it's not like another game that has a good choice system. I don't know if I've told you about Chrono Trigger
I've heard of
for
it.
the SNES.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, so what's interesting about Chrono Trigger, and this may seem a little off topic, but it does have relation to this, is that in the beginning of the game, you're at this millennial fair, and you meet this girl who becomes like a main party member.
Okay.
And how you interact with her, she asks you to like take her around the fair and hang out. And there are things where you do if like you wait for her to like make choices, or if you like help, like she runs into you and like she drops her pendant, and if you go to pick up the pendant first versus like seeing if she's okay, it actually changes how the trial later on that convicts you of like kidnapping the princess plays out. So like
Huh.
if you had gone to the pendant first, the judge will be like, well, if you look at this example, and it goes like in the memory and it says like you chose it. The game doesn't have choice options like this game does,
Right.
but it does kind of look at how you play the game, which is kind of an interesting concept. And in that case, that actually has implications on the plot, even though you can either like break out of prison or wait for like someone to rescue you anyway. So like it doesn't severely change it, but I do like how in Life is Strange that even though all those decisions you made don't really impact the ending, I do like how it's like a proper kind of character growth
Yeah.
for a lot of those instances. Like if you help the girl who always getting hit by stuff, like she does grow to like you, and you can have conversations. And
Yeah.
that's something that I don't think a lot of games like really look upon, and I really like that. Like I like how that one girl is mad at you because like you go on a date with Warren, or like you say like, oh, this Friday we're gonna go to the movies and
Yeah.
stuff. Like I loved all the characters, and I loved how um it really felt like you were changing their like opinions and stances on things depending on how you like, who you talk to. And
Yeah.
it did feel like every character was there for a purpose. Like there weren't a lot of just like rando NPCs. Like I can't think of one character who like just didn't like, their role just didn't like really
Matter.
matter in terms of like personality or why they were there. It felt like
Yeah.
all the students and the teachers were just like really well thought out. And we'll get to character discussion later, but
Yeah.
I do like the choice in that aspect of like, you can choose to water your plant, and it just it either stays alive or dies, and that's like, it doesn't really have any like point, I guess, in
Yeah.
the overall game structure, but it's a nice, like, it makes the game feel more like fleshed out,
Yeah.
having those like tiny choices that don't affect a lot, but like they do have some sort of outcome, which I think it's crazy to think too, how many you can miss accidentally.
Oh yeah.
Because you can wander around and like click on everything, but there are still little things that like if you go back to the logbook, it's like oh, you didn't choose to do this, and it's like, oh wow, like I could have explored even more and found a little more things to
Yeah.
do, like
I didn't even know I
writing
could
on a
do that.
whiteboard.
I didn't even know
Yeah.
I could do that. Like that's
Yeah,
crazy. Cause
which merits a lot of playthrough too, I think.
Oh,
you know.
yeah.
I don't know if I do it immediately, but like after a while, like I'll definitely go back and see what I can like change and stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Which I love it when, because it kind of feels like an actual like, besides the whole time travel issue and then the kidnapping and the killing
Yeah.
and all that. Like, besides that, it did feel like you're with high schoolers. I mean, we're starting our like last year of college, so I think we were pretty good to judge of what high schoolers say.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
some people had issues that like no high schooler would say that, like use some
Yeah,
of like the
yeah.
lingo they would like in the beginning.
Yeah.
The best example is when Victoria goes she says something to Max and goes at the end, says sad face. I say lol unironically
Yeah.
every day of my life. So like a lot of people had issues like no high schooler would talk like that. I'm like, I say stuff not exactly what they're saying, but on the same like level as them constantly. So I
Yeah.
felt like it's pretty realistic, and just like seeing the interactions between people and how like I mean, I went to an all girls school, so I don't know really interactions with guys in high school, but like seeing how the females, all the girls interact with one another, like the kind of the posse around Victoria, like I saw that in high school. Like
Yeah.
just seeing like there were certain things that did stand out to me, and be like, yeah, no, that's definitely a realistic thing, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then being able to talk to them and like really realize like, oh, maybe they're not bad people, they just want to fit in somewhere or have like someone to go to.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
when you're actually talking to them and you say certain things to them, like you have the choices or you rewind to talk to them again, they kind of are like, oh, well, maybe this isn't the only, like, this one person isn't the only one. Like, maybe, like, other people are all right as well. Which
Yeah.
is
Like I
nice.
liked how you kind of tied up ends with Victoria, like because she was next on Nathan's or what they thought was Nathan slash
Jefferson.
Mr. Jefferson, was it, target list?
Yeah.
How like you could talk to her at the end, and it was like, hey, watch out. Like they have some archetypes for like characters in the game, but like I like how none of them are ever like one-sided. Like Victoria's kind of the stuck-up like like
Yeah.
leader of the what was it, the Vortex Club, I think it was called.
Yeah, the Vortex Club.
But like
the lamest
yeah,
name
but
ever.
like oh yeah, like I like how they relate that to the tornado and stuff. Like it's pretty clever. But yeah, I do like how yeah, like the dialogue, I know a lot of people thought was like not great, which is kind of interesting because I never had a problem with it. I thought like it wasn't like they're not writing Shakespeare or anything, but these do feel like genuine conversations. Like I like how you can just kind of talk to random people. Like one of my favorite examples is near the diner. I think the first time you go there, and you can talk to the fisherman and just talk about like
oh,
the
yeah.
fish in arcade. Yeah, like like how the fishing is going in Arcadia Bay, and like
It was
you
awful.
actually do end up saving him from. You can save him
Yeah,
when
I
the
remember
storm
that.
hits. Yeah, which is nice too. But like again, it's like a conversation where it's just like, um, because it's simple and not like overly complex, it does feel more realistic, and I really appreciate that. I don't know why a lot of people thought like, just because they're writing about like smileys and emotion phases, like, that's what high schoolers talk about.
Yeah.
Like not everyone is like maybe as you know talking about philosophy and life and but I think Max was a great outlet for like I liked her inner monologues and how she thought about stuff,
Oh yeah, I
like
love
she
that.
kind of commented on the characters without talking sometimes. Like I thought they did a really good job in just being like um especially during that opening sequence where you just walk around, listen to the music,
Yes, I love
and
that.
like talking to all the characters. Yeah, she kind of, or well, you don't talk, but she makes like inner commentary. Like, what a great way to like introduce like the high school, because you kind of drown out like the jibber jabber of like high school lingo, and then you can kind of like jump into Mac's perspective and think like, okay, so what's the deal with like this character? Like, why are they just more than like a high schooler? Like,
Yeah.
I thought that was a very good way of like kind of introducing you to the game without being like, here's Chloe and she likes to do this, and here's like
Yeah.
it's very like a natural feeling, and
Yeah, it's
I thought they
first
did a great job
impressions.
with that. Yeah.
Like I guess probably if you look at the people who had issues with the dialogue, like seeing their
Hmm.
age, it might have like an effect on it. Because if they're older, like haven't been in high school for a very long time, or like wasn't in high school when texting and like the internet were very prevalent, I think
Yeah.
they're probably like that's why they have issues. Like that wasn't my high school experience, but for
Hmm.
us who are not that far out of high school, like we can look at it and it's like, no, this is fairly realistic. And like I liked it that it was very short conversations or very like normal sentences. Because when a character
Yeah.
starts like, oh, here's my super monologue that is very dramatic and all that, it's like very, very few people do that. I know some people who would do that, but that's because they're extra and they always have to be a little extra. But for the normal, average human being, they're going to just speak their mind and like keep it short, sweet. And if they really don't want to talk to you, they'll keep it even shorter and sweeter.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. What should we move on to next? You think like story
I think we
characters?
could go into story and like touch base with characters and like
Yeah.
I can also make comments about the level design in this game.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That'll be an interesting one. All right. Characters. Yeah. Good start. So I can't think of one character in this game that I didn't like. You know,
Well, that
think was
you were
boring or didn't like. Like they
yeah.
did a really good job with like I don't know. It's just my personal like two favorites that like were just kind of there and didn't like have the super impact was I love the janitor guy. I forget his
I
name.
love to do
Samuel,
yeah
was it?
Samuel.
Was it Samuel?
He like talked in the
Samuel.
third person.
Yes, I love Samuel. I thought that was such a like. I liked how you could like talk to him and like everyone's like, oh, Samuel's so weird, but you can like sit down and talk to him and he's always like, the animals tell me things like it's almost like he's a little like
Out of it.
I don't know what the word is. He's a little out of it, but like he still has that kind of like philosophical wisdom to him where it's like like it's just the way he was talking. Like every opportunity I got, I tried to talk to him because I
Oh yeah.
loved like just all he said about just like the animals tell me things and you have your own spirit animal. And the science teacher, I don't remember the one with the petition.
Oh yeah.
I really liked her too. Yeah, she was really great 'cause she was always like happy to see you and um, she was always like for the security cameras and stuff and like you got a few moments where you can just talk to them and like again it just the moments where you can kind of talk to these random characters even though they don't have a lot of like impact on the story.
Yeah.
I thought that was really 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 cool and I liked Warren a lot. I liked Mr. Jefferson for a time period
Mr.
before he went off the
Jefferson
deep end.
looks like one of my professors,
Yeah.
which is really off-putting because I really like this professor and I think he's a really cool guy. And when I made that connection, I'm going, oh,
Mm-hmm.
mm.
Yeah, it was kind of unfortunate. Um, and I like how they handled like all um the kind of like not the staff members, but like the principal, for example. I thought like even though he was kind of like an asshole for most of it,
Yeah.
like he kind of had his own like problems. And then Nathan was kind of a little it's like stereotypical. I think
Rich boy
like
whose family
I
owns the school and could get away
yeah
with anything.
yeah I thought his like I don't know his thing with like Mr. Jefferson was like I don't know it I don't think it quite rubbed me the right way in terms of like I thought it was very random that he just like ended up killing Rachel like that. Like I know he was trying to like impress Mr. Jefferson, but like I don't know. I always felt like they were trying to like just wrap up really quickly, kind of, and try to tie Nathan into because like
Yeah.
I liked the twist that like it was Mr. Jefferson because after all this build up to Nathan, and then all of a sudden it's just like bam, he shoots Chloe, and you're just like whoa, like that was intense. But um, like it obviously had to relate back to the Prescotts because like the place was under their barn kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and um, I like how it kind of all built up to the Prescott still because everyone kind of like hated them and stuff. But I don't know, like it was a nice twist ending, and I'm sure there was a lot of foreshadowing for Mr. Jefferson that I just didn't see at first because I was a little surprised by it.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think there were probably moments like he was kind of talking to Kate oddly, and he was also near. He was after Kate committed suicide when you're all in the office and it's
Yeah.
like you or Max, Nathan,
And
the
Jefferson.
David I think was his name
Oh,
is,
yeah.
and Mr. Jefferson.
Yeah.
Mr. Jefferson like or the principal's like Mr. Jefferson, you did this and this to Kate, and he
Yeah.
did kind of like talk to her weirdly, and I think if you look back, there's definitely some like hints at it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But it was kind of it was definitely an unfortunate twist, and like I guess I believed his like kind of um complex for like what he was doing, kind of like the you know getting wrapped up in this obsessive passion of art.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't know, it wasn't quite like I don't know, like it almost felt like there weren't enough strong hints of him being like a little like
A little
I
messed
guess
up.
he's not really. Yeah, like he didn't quite appear like he hit it a little too well. Like I think I would have appreciated more kind of like because I can't think back to one statement that he said like immediately that like should have like caught my attention. Just because like that's kind of like a really big twist. Because like he was like drugging girls and taking pictures of them like
Yeah.
in like some shady base. Like I felt like there should have been a little more like
A little
I know,
more
like,
like
that was an
hints and
that was
clues. to
yeah,
it.
like I don't really appreciate the Shyamalan-esque twist. Like
Yeah.
I just I'm not saying that you have to like almost reveal it, but like they do kind of talk about in some of my classes at school um for like character twists and Deus Ex Machinas where like someone brought up how what people don't like about Frozen is that Hans kind of has like a random twist out of nowhere,
Yeah.
which
that
there
makes
are
sense.
there are a few metaphorical twists that people like come up with how he's like um acting in the first one and kind of stuff like that. um However, it doesn't necessarily like I think always ruin or change the story that much because like at the end of the day like it was a solid twist that I didn't see coming personally,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I do appreciate that to some level even if it wasn't like completely like guessable in certain scenarios.
Yeah.
But I do think like the game is good at having those like oh shit moments, and
Oh, definitely.
yeah, it I guess that was the ending of like episode 4 probably. I feel like that was a cliffhanger when he shot Chloe.
Yeah, I believe so. And then you
Maybe.
wake up in episode 5 and you're
Yeah.
in the studio.
Yeah. Like the game definitely like if it was coming out like when I was playing it, like I would have like pre-ordered that like immediately. Like it does a very good job of drawing you into these like scenarios like and I really appreciate like like it's a hook that like I don't feel like a lot of games have nowadays.
Yeah.
Um, because like it's a very story driven experience. It's almost like an interactive graphic novel at times.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that appeals to a lot of people because you don't really have to do a whole lot. But I will use this to transition into a few issues I kind of had with that whole like rewind choice system. And
Yeah.
there were two instances I found it was a little annoying. I sometimes when you couldn't like get the right result you wanted, and you knew you had to like you knew there was only one result that you needed to get.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a scenario like, for example, with Frank in the RV on the beach. Like most of those scenarios, if you talked it out wrong, you ended up either I think shooting the dog, getting shot yourself, or Chloe gets shot, or you shoot, you kill uh, Frank
Yeah.
in those scenarios. And it's like there's one option you need to get like. So I accidentally killed Frank the first time because I misspoke, and I was like, oh well, of course
Good
I would
job.
rewind. Yeah, and then I tried another scenario which also killed Frank because like essentially you have to talk to him without triggering him, and it's
Yeah.
hard because you have to like first talk about his dog to get him to kind of like like soften up a bit, and then but like it's annoying too though because in some of those scenarios like that one, you say something that you're pretty sure will work. It's like, oh, you have a nice dog, and then it's like you mention like Rachel's letter or something like Rachel really cared about you, and then he's always something that's like you don't know anything about Rachel, don't get to, like
Yeah.
he just kind of like it's kind of annoying because there was no obvious like answer that was gonna get you that, so like I had to rewind that like 5 times. And I was playing with a controller, and sometimes the rewinding can be a little bit weird because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it'll do the fast rewind to the point where you need it, sometimes it won't. And there were a couple scenarios like where if you're not patient in scenarios like I am sometimes, like it can get a bit annoying, like the diner scene where you're trying to show Chloe like your powers,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to observe like 4 different things happening and tell her that like in order. And it's like sometimes you weren't paying attention to this part, you have to like sometimes like um it could be a little annoying of how often you have to like rewind to get the ending, but I think it's not like a huge deal. It's just I was a little frustrated when like I thought a choice was going like fine, and then all of a sudden like the character like just turned and was just like freaking out like Frank or something like that. So I
Mm-hmm.
do think sometimes the choices can be a little like just guessing, like how they'll react instead of like you knowing how the conversation will go. But I think those moments were like kind of few and in between, so I don't think it was like that bad. But I did think that was something that like was a little frustrating when like you thought you were doing it right, when you thought about it logically, and then all of a sudden like someone like Frank would just kind of jump to conclusion and like pull out a gun, and it was just like,
Yeah.
oh come on, like I thought I was, yeah, I gotta do this all again and go back, like. But for the most part, I think it handled it pretty well.
Yeah.
And I thought the moments of choice that were important did feel like it was never like I just immediately chose it. It was always like you did have to think about it for a solid like 30 seconds.
Oh yeah,
Say for the
definitely.
for the money example, but like, oh boy, like I don't think I've ever experienced like, hey, pull the cord on Chloe or don't, like, jeez,
Yeah,
that
that
is
took a really
insane.
intense turn. That like that
Yeah,
whole like what if her father never died thing, like bringing
yeah,
up like that whole like what if thing, and then like all this other stuff would have happened, and you go, oh, and then it's not
yeah.
just like Chloe is definitely affected, but then you see that
Mhm.
Max is perceived completely differently by all her classmates.
Yeah,
Like when
I
he
thought that was a
talk,
really
oh,
interesting.
I love that, because then it was like really is like kind of like a parallel, like
Yeah,
almost like parallel universe where like this one thing changed, but like for her, but like something had to have happened to you to
hmm,
get to that point, which I find really interesting. And also with choices in this game, I found them a lot of times there weren't like some of them were very straightforward, like shoot and don't shoot, like that's pretty clear. But sometimes they weren't. They were kind of like you didn't say what you thought you were going to say, because it was kind of like, oh, say this and you say something completely differently. It was like, okay, then I guess this is where we're going with this now,
Yeah.
which is kind of annoying because I would have liked to have a better idea of what I was saying before I said it, because bad things can happen when you don't
Yeah.
truly understand like what you're going for.
Yeah.
Like, I know
And
that it makes sense to have it be like a short phrase instead of like whatever sentence you're going to say, but like let the short phrase be a little more like on the nose with what is going to be said. It wasn't a
Yeah.
lot of times, but like some of them were very like hard, and like you would screw up a couple of times because of it.
Yeah. I think um, even if the choices were like the big ones were a little like one sided on either end, I do appreciate though like how the way the story kind of acts and the way you attach to the characters, like even like going through a playthrough to like choose different options than I did before. Like I have a real hard time like choosing an ending just for the sake of choosing, or choosing a choice just for the sake of choosing a choice,
Yeah.
because I'm so like invested in this story, like I really wouldn't want to take the money, even if I am very curious as to like how that would play out, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like your choices do feel like they matter in the context of like that moment in the narrative. Like regardless if you look back on the ending and be like, well, it didn't really matter at the end. Like I do like how, um, like I don't remember if like I think killing Frank forced you to go back and rewind, or Chloe dying too, which um, I guess that was more of kind of like the game trying to like not have too many different endings, because there were scenarios where like if you messed up, it forced you to go back.
Oh yeah.
And well, actually thinking back to moments like that, that I want to bring up real quick is what did you think of that part where you mess up time completely and in that dream state where you're wandering around and have to hide from all like the worst case scenarios of all the
Oh
characters?
yeah. I found
That was annoying for me.
yeah, it was.
I don't know.
It was annoying, but it was also interesting to bring up. Like, you're severely messing with time, and like
Yeah.
things are going to break. So I
Yeah.
think it was kind of like one of those realizations for like you playing as Max. Be like, my powers have really screwed something up.
Yeah.
So for stories like in the case of the story, it was important to have that to kind of show that, oh man, like what I'm doing isn't necessarily a really really good thing,
Right.
but it was annoying. Like gameplay wise, it was annoying.
Yeah, because like there was that one part where I think David's trying to find you in the school, which, by the way, like that swimming scene was like a really nice like touch, like just having the characters um kind of like mellow out and just talk. Like I like how there were moments like that. And we'll jump into it again, but there was that part where you have to hide and make sure he doesn't find you. And the game is not really meant to be like a stealth game,
Oh yeah, no.
obviously. So like having that segment kind of felt a little weird. And I think someone brought up, I think it was like Mother's Basement or something, one of his reviews, like how the fact that she saw like the worst side of all those characters was kind of interesting. Because I know it's supposed to be like a nightmare kind of like time reality, but someone mentioned that it would have been really hard to make a couple of different versions of it, obviously, but like it's kind of weird that like if you chose to like embrace Warren, for example, and like kind of like go along with him and not think of him as like creepy or anything,
Yeah.
she still saw the creepy side of Warren regardless in her nightmares,
Yeah.
which almost makes it feel like what the choice you make with the characters doesn't really affect how you think of them in the end, because like I don't know, because if you had like thought of Warren as really annoying and like get off my back kind of thing, it would make sense if in the nightmares like you saw the worst side of him, but because all the characters were just brought out like, you know,
Yeah.
like it didn't make sense for like, you know, it like the voice inside of your head like imagining all the characters like being a certain way to you like would make sense if that's how you felt about them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like just having like Samuel, for example, I think he was one of the flashlight guys you ran into, and it's
Oh,
like, but
yeah.
like why Samuel of all people to be like,
Yeah, because
you know,
like,
trying to find you? Like it should be characters that you were like afraid of or like, you know,
you
like
didn't have
didn't.
good interactions with.
Yeah, like Nathan would be like fine, you know, Mr. Jefferson obviously because like
At
you know,
that
he
point, you
just
start
turned.
realizing, like, oh,
Yeah, but like it was like Samuel was one of them, I'm pretty sure, and um the principal who like
I
you
guess
kind of had a rocky
I
thing
could
with
see the
first.
principal just because of the
Yeah.
interactions you have with him aren't that none of them are really positive. Like,
Yeah, like even though you kind of understand his like disposition at the end,
yeah.
like I do like that one part where like you have to sneak around him,
Oh yeah.
and like he's like just out there drinking. You're like, oh, he has like an alcohol problem, and and one thing I do want to bring up that was kind of interesting is in terms of like game mechanics, like this isn't another tear at the game, but mostly it's like something I always forgot about, which is kind of interesting, is that um I always forgot like that time travel didn't affect you and your interact like it didn't affect um things that were happening like things that were you were touching or holding sometimes.
Right. Yeah.
So like I always forgot like I always got stuck in a scenario where it's just um like for example when during the Vortex Club party where you move the thing in the way of the pool and the guy catches you. But if you rewind, I always forget that you don't rewind yourself.
Yeah, you stay
even though
in
that was
place.
always like obvious, which I thought was kind of interesting because like I'd always like have these scenarios where it's just like, it's like oh dang, like I think there was one time I actually had to look something up, and it was because I forgot that like rewinding doesn't change the things that happen to you. You know,
Yeah.
like if you're holding something, you'll still be holding it, or like if you're in one room, because I'm always used to like Prince of Persia, for example, has like another like rewind mechanic, but it rewinds like everything, including you. So if you get hit, you know, you
Right.
can like rewind time. And I think like I'm not used to a game like where the time affects like everything around you and not just you.
Yeah.
And there were some clever scenarios where like you had to like, you know, do something and then rewind the effect, and you were like where you had to be. But because you don't see it so often, like I thought that was interesting how I'd always like forget that thing, because most games when you rewind time, if that it's like if you get hit or something, so you rewind before you got hit and then you know change your course of action. But I always seem to forget that you know you could do that to yourself and not affect like yourself when you rewind time.
Yeah.
And I guess I do appreciate the mechanic too, because I think that's a little bit different than just like
Everything being affected.
yeah, because for example, in that the first part in the storm dream you have, like there's you know like a tree or a log or whatever boulder that's like falling towards you, and if you hit it, you rewind the boulder.
Yeah.
And in that scenario, they could just have you rewind yourself too to like avoid hitting the boulder.
Yeah.
But they you know they have it so like you're just rewinding the things falling and you're staying in place. So I did think that was a pretty unique time travel mechanic that you don't always see a lot. It's always like it affects everything, but in this scenario, it just doesn't affect your character, which is why I always forgot that like, oh duh, like I can just you know walk toward into this room and then rewind the effects and I'll still be in the room kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Well, because you mentioned that, because they did bring that up in the very beginning when you first got your powers, when you're in the class with Mr. Jefferson. He calls on you. You forget the answer, so you rewind and you say the answer because you know it. And then with when you save Chloe from being shot, you pick up the thing she gets shot. You rewind time and you pull the fire alarm. Like
Yeah.
I like how they teach you it in a nice way of like not being like, well, if you do this like you won't lose your items. Like it wasn't like very hand-holdy. It went with like what was going on, but it
Yeah.
was because like it's doing time stuff in a very unique manner. Or like if other games have done something similar to it, it's like they're very rare and not a popular idea for it.
Mm-hmm.
So like you will forget about it, but I did like how they kind of like incorporated that into the story without like giving you like here's the tutorial on how to use time travel, which was nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and I thought it was interesting too how like with the time travel, and this is going back to the ending with Chloe, is what's weird is it always seemed like I can't remember if they talked about this in the game. I feel like Max might have brought this up, but like it seemed like fate was just trying to kill Chloe at every chance it got. Like, think about it. Like, there was the training part. There was the part where she shot herself. There where Frank shot her. Where, she's in the hospital.
Yeah.
Or I mean, she's like paraplegic kind of thing.
I think
And like it always seemed like the game
arms.
was out to kill Chloe.
Oh yeah.
And yet like you could choose an ending that didn't kill Chloe.
Yeah.
And like sacrifice everyone else. And I think that's what got a lot of people frustrated. Where it's just like
I did all this stuff to save her and now I can't
and I think actually it would have been better if the game actually didn't allow you to make that choice and it was just affected by the choices you had already made.
That would have been really nice.
Yeah, so that way like I know a lot of people like maybe not a lot, but some people could be frustrated because like they don't get the ending they want because they didn't know that like it was going to choose for them. But I think it would have made a little more sense because like think about it this way, like if you had always made choices that favored Chloe, like it makes sense if you could choose to save her.
Yeah.
But like if you like kind of ignored Chloe as much as you could, like for example, if you just didn't like her as a character, like then the choice is obvious that you're gonna save the town, like
yeah,
like if it's gonna be obvious either way which one you're gonna choose based on how you play the game, like I feel like the game should have just made the choice for you. So it's like, oh well, like in what scenario if you didn't like Chloe would you just choose to save Chloe? Like, one life versus like I don't know a couple hundred kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like I almost feel like the game should have gone that route instead, and I think that would have been a little more satisfying, because that way, like, it kind of dilutes the choice if you're just forced to pick on the spot kind of thing. Because again, the game did seem like it was trying to like kill off Chloe every chance it got.
Mm-hmm.
You always had to like end up saving her from every scenario. Like even when you try to help her by like bringing her dad back, like it backfires in her favor, and it's like the game was trying to tell you that like hey, you can't really stop the inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
So it almost feels like choosing to save Chloe, like what good does it do? Because she's just gonna try to get like like it doesn't feel like fate would stop playing its hand at that point. Is that like you would just find another scenario where you have to kill Chloe, and it's like it almost feels like the game is just trying to tell you this and then making that choice to not do it. It's kind of like, oh well, then why does like why did you have such an emphasis? Like, because she got into a lot of issues. Again, like I said, there was like at least 4 or 5 scenarios where
she almost
like, died or got hurt, and it's like if you're gonna force this, it's like why am I gonna like why would I from one perspective, why would I choose to save her at this point if she's just gonna like probably die anyway, But I don't know. I don't think it really ruins the game in any sense. I think games have done it worse. I mean, like look at Mass Effect. You have just one ending.
Yeah.
Despite what choices you made, at least you do get that choice of like what happens. But I think it would have been a lot stronger if the game made that choice for you and had different scenario endings depending on what you did, because sometimes like it can be a little bit more impactful if like it's not just done by the push of a button.
Mm-hmm.
If like some of the choices were more indirect kind of.
Yeah.
Like I do feel like sometimes it was just kind of like you brought up with shoot this person, don't shoot this person. Like I think it could have been a little more subtle at times in terms of like your choices you had made impact a major decision without you having to choose like shoot or don't shoot. Like I think that would have been a little more strong in some scenarios where like you do something and you can't if you can't rewind it. Like I do think there should have been a little more parts like with Kate where you didn't have that like option to rewind and you just kind of had to live with it.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
I really agree
like
with
I think
that.
that could have been a more that could have been a little bit more strong. And I'm curious to see like what the Before the Storm's going to be about. You know, because I don't know when that comes out, but I'm interested to see what they're going to do with that because the story did kind of end um, with what we got, so it's not like they could have an episode 6. I don't think many people would want that. Although I am a little sad that Chloe's voice actor is not returning, but that's
Yeah.
okay. You know, like it'll be a different game and she'll be a different age because it's with Rachel.
Yeah, it's a
I imagine
it's a
if it's Before the
prequel.
Storm.
It's prequel.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's focusing on Chloe. So I think you play as Chloe, and I think that'd be really interesting, because time travel will definitely not be a factor in this.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I think
So
you get
you
to
want
see a lot more of this world that has already
Mhm.
been built with because my memory's correct, that Chloe went to Blackwell Academy and then got kicked out.
right? Yep.
So like seeing like what led to her being kicked out, because in the trailers they've shown for Life is Strange 2, she has brown hair.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Because I think the blue hair was probably like way later
Oh, yeah.
after the whole dad scenario. Because what I like about that too is like um regardless of if you like Chloe or not as a character, because I know some people didn't because of like
Yeah.
they said she was selfish and things like that. However, I think everything can be made in defense of like her past, you know, because like um you know like the death of a family member like affects people in very different ways, and you know we've seen with um David, who is this like you know overprotective you know security officer who is constantly like you know like waltzes his way into the family,
yeah.
you know like marries Joyce, her mom, and like you know creates this scenario where it's like you know I'm very overprotective and I'm just trying to be a good dad, but you have like Chloe who's lost a dad and you know has this new guy in her life who like is trying to be overprotective, which is like you know the very opposite thing she wants to do right now is rebel because she's feeling all these like emotions of you know
Yeah.
like sadness, and she wants to feel selfish because she feels like you know the scenarios aren't in her favor, you know. And I think everything can be made in her defense. Like I like how she went from like this you know kind of happy little girl to like you know this emotionally repressed rebellious teenager,
Yeah.
that always felt like very genuine. Like even if you I thought all her um you know her actions and emotions were pretty much just in every scenario because it's like
Yeah.
you know like this is like what happens to some people when they experience like an emotionally like traumatizing moment. It's like you know like she maybe like you don't know what she's feeling on the inside besides what she's saying. So I don't feel like any scenario can be like oh you know she's always being like selfish, um like I don't blame her that you know she'd be mad at Max for not like if you didn't like choose to hang out with her when the Kate stuff is going on, because it's like yeah like your you know her dad passed away, her best friend left, like I feel like all these like you know emotions and reactions are pretty just on her end. Like I don't expect her to be like a saint obviously, which I think a lot of people were like oh you know like Chloe's like so selfish and you know self-centered, you know why would you like her as a character. But again like you know like is a it's a subjective thing, but I think objectively like you can argue that she's a very well written character because of like her backstory and her past, and I don't think anything was like you know out of character or unjustified, um, which is fine with how the ending was structured too, because
Yeah.
of like you know you are going to choose to save Chloe or you don't and sacrifice the town. But again, I do think that every scenario of her was pretty well written and well done, like most of the characters, to be honest. But
Yeah.
I do think there's a reason that everyone, you know, like has a thing for Chloe. And again, like that was probably one of the most like genuine like friendships I've seen in a game in a while that didn't feel very forced, you know?
Yeah.
Like her interaction with Max was always just like, you know, those moments where you're just kind of like I really like the mechanics where you could just like wait, like you didn't have to do anything, like you could just sit in bed, like listen to music with her kind of thing.
Yeah.
And she kind of like inner monologues for a while, and then you can just kind of like sit there and like the camera would cut to different angles. Like I like those little moments that you could have with characters, you know, like the pool scene like they just did a great job of like making everything feel very genuine. Like I didn't feel anything was forced at all. You know, everything was kind of like naturally flowing, and everything was believable.
Yeah, I really like their friendship just because they were childhood friends who have been apart for a while. So they both realized that they're not the same people as they
Mm-hmm.
were. So trying to reconnect with an old childhood friend, and that can sometimes be very rocky. And you kind of saw that at first, where they saw that they were pretty different, but then like they had those memories and they were able
Yeah.
to like reconnect. So like it wasn't forced at all. It was like, oh, they do have these like old good memories, but they really know that they're different people now. Like a lot has
Mm-hmm.
happened between the last time they saw each other. So
Yeah.
I agreed. Like it was nice seeing like friendship like this,
Mm-hmm.
or sometimes more if you were playing it towards that. Like
Yeah.
I find this is really interesting, and I do agree with. I kind of wish that like the choices you made took the final choice of the game out of the picture, where like it all just kind of like if you did certain things, it would just add like a tally mark to like Arcadia Bay or Chloe, and like in the
Yeah.
end it would make judgment calls. Like seemed like you were leaning more towards Chloe, so you're going to choose Chloe. And even at the end when that choice came up, like Chloe's well aware that like they have been talking. It's like, yo, every time you try to do something, like I have almost died. I have almost died like 30 times with this.
Yeah, she does bring it up.
And it's
Yeah.
like this is the universe trying to tell you and me that I'm not meant to be here anymore. Like so like when she is trying to like she's talking you into choosing the other option of choosing
Yeah.
Arcadia Bay, which I find to like kind of like be like a really heart-wrenching moment where like here's a friend of yours who like she knows that it's not like she wasn't meant for this, not in
Mm-hmm.
like a very like oh she's suicidal, but it's like I've almost died, and like if you go back you're able to save all these people, you can save my mom. I find that to be a
Yeah.
very like interesting moment, because a lot of times it would be like save this person, it'll be like you should save me over all these people because I'm your best friend. Like a lot of things would choose to do something like that, where
Yeah.
it wouldn't be like that character being like, yo, clearly the universe doesn't want me here, like
Mm-hmm.
choose to save Arcadia, go back, like make sure my mom's okay. And I find that to be very like interesting for this character, because you have like spent all this time together. So you've got like if you even if you didn't like her, you did spend a good amount of time with her, regardless.
Right.
Because you're both investigating Rachel Amber. So you're
Mm-hmm.
both investigating, and then like you spend a lot of time. So regardless, like you would see this person be like, "Hey, I'm clearly not meant for this. Like, save my mom. Like, save Arcadia Bay. I understand."
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
But it still makes me
So
mad that all the choices
Yeah.
that you've made up to that point really don't matter. Like it
Yeah.
affects like how you feel within that moment, but
Mm-hmm.
in the long run, it doesn't matter. Which
Yeah.
is one of the issues I always have with like choice-based games. It's
Yeah.
like when it doesn't feel real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Speaking of realism, though, I think this would be a good transition. So, you watched playthroughs of the game, right?
Yeah.
Up to the like most of the point. So, do you recall like how high their graphics settings were when they were playing it, or like how it looked at least visually?
It looked pretty good. Like they're going for a more realistic style, but you could still tell that it was stylized.
Yeah.
So-
like for
Yeah, sorry.
yeah, like sorry. Well, for example, like I played on the high settings when I had my new computer, or like the highest. I think I played episode 1 like normally on my old one, and I have to say like both of them looked like really really nice. And I know for a fact that everything is all hand painted textures, which is a
Yeah.
really nice touch because you don't always see that in a game. It's always kind of like, it's a very stylized realism, and even though sometimes the character models looked a bit like
Janky.
janky. Like there were some scenes where like it looked like Max wasn't like really focusing her eyes or something like that.
Yeah.
And there were a little bit of scenarios where some of the characters felt a little like I imagine they definitely used a lot of motion capture for this. Because again, most of it is like
movie.
most of it is not like, yeah, it's a movie. Like it's not really like a game that has to have like mechanical animation to it a lot.
Yeah,
However, I do think the game's strongest aspect in this scenario was lighting. I thought they did a fantastic job
I
with
agree with
like
that.
how the game was lit and like however the environment looked. Like just Arcadia Bay was just like beautiful, and it really helped with those hand painted textures. And even though some of the character models looked a little bit janky at times, just because of like um, how they would animate. Like sometimes the lip sync was a little bit off,
Hmm.
especially towards the end. I noticed there was a lot of situations where like Max is like barely moving her lips and stuff. And again, it's a long, detailed game. There's a lot of environments they have to model and
Yeah.
a lot of characters. Like they definitely use motion capture for like I'm sure almost all of it. Um, even the face, I think, and even though it's not like Last of Us level like
Hmm.
facial animation detail, I think they the look it gave off was just very very satisfying. Like it again, this with the lighting and when you look out like over the sunset and the beaches,
Oh
like
yeah.
it looks really really nice. And um, it also gives me like some inspiration for my film because again, hand painted textures can have like a really um, nice impact because you're kind of painting where you want the light to be essentially. Because it's like the problem is like if you use um like a photo like a photo of like a rock for example for a texture, like it's like you either have to make it really like low res to hide it,
Hmm.
or like you have to like you're already going for like a really realistic look because you just took a picture of like a rock with like super detailed lighting on it. So I appreciate that every texture like looked hand painted and it wasn't just like um you know like it wasn't flat in any scenario because like if you just use a simple like painted texture on a wall for example,
Hmm.
it gives a little bit of character because it's not just a flat like color. It's like every like interior house and all the items like really really good, even though like um it's like the camera is like pretty far from like most like little items and stuff like that. But I
Yeah.
do think the game like it's Square Enix, like it's gonna be good like graphics wise. But I do think they did a really nice job with like um stylization. Like it has a very unique look to it, and I don't think you see that in a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of games recently.
Yeah. So
Because
many games
again,
go for
it's
realism.
yeah, and I like how it doesn't like go like cell shaded either.
Oh yeah.
It's not like a Borderlands scenario or like a Wind Waker. It's like it's just like here's hand painted textures on literally everything. Which again, I can't think of a game that
Has done that
usually does that.
recently.
Yeah, it's usually like the characters are done a certain way and the background's done a certain way. But I think in this scenario, like since they're both painted with the same style, like they fit very well into their environment. It never looks like they're um, not like where they're supposed to be. Like
Hmm.
everything is kind of like very connected and feels like again a real place, which I think is the biggest draw. Is like I believed everything about like Arcadia Bay, from like the graphics and the characters, and again they just do a really good job of selling like the story and like everything being very believable even if it's not realistic in some scenarios.
Oh yeah.
They did a great job with again how this game looks, even again if some scenarios can be a little bit janky, but again it's not really that big of a deal. It's a very nice looking game.
Yeah. Speaking of Arcadia Bay, so Arcadia Bay is supposed to be like in Oregon. I've
Hmm.
I've been to Oregon, and let me tell you, they've hit the nail on the head with like the scenery and the feel of it, because
Yeah.
it just feels right. Because a lot of times you can say this is in this place, like there's a fake town in a real state, and they made it
Yeah.
feel like if I didn't know that Arcadia Bay wasn't a real place, I would have been like, man, I want to visit Arcadia Bay. Like
Yeah.
it looks beautiful. Because I've been to
Yeah.
very similar place. Like I want to say like the beach reminds me a lot of the movie The Goonies.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like when they escape and they're all on the beach and they see the pirate ship in the ocean. Like
Hmm.
in my memory's correct, that was filmed in Oregon. It was either
Yeah.
Oregon or Washington. I mixed the two up because they're basically the same state.
Right.
but like it had that feel to it. It was beautiful, like the grass, the waterfront, like it felt like a real city that I would say I would love to visit. Like I would love to go to that lighthouse. And I like how the lighthouse did play an important role in this. Like the first, it was like the first major
Yeah.
thing you see in the beginning.
Yeah, it's
Like you see a photo of it in the classroom, and you go back to that point.
mhm.
So it was like a major landmark in this game, and it just felt real, and I was like very cool because it's
Mhm.
so easy just to be like, okay, we're just going to recreate like Chicago,
Yeah. Yeah.
or we're going to recreate like San Francisco. I'm calling you out, Watch Dogs, right now.
Yeah.
Calling you out. Like you can either try to make a city like super realistic, which they did a great job with. They could improve on other aspects of the game, but like recreating that's an exact city with like slight changes was incredible. But I think it's more telling to be able to create a new town that feels like it could exist.
Right.
And
Yeah, like it feels like so many games go like San Francisco or New York, or like it's rare to see a game, I think, like try to do a small town.
oh yeah,
And again, I know a lot, like it's kind of common just for AAA games to, design after a city or whatnot. And I don't know what the status of this game would be, because I don't think it's definitely not indie, because it's like Square Enix. It's kind of like somewhere in the middle.
I want to say somewhere in the middle because Squeenix was the people who like published it, but it was Don't Nod, a small French
Yeah.
company that made it. So I want to
Oh,
say it's indie that got a little help from the AAA scene, which
Yeah,
is
I think
rare.
that's a good way to put it.
And also,
Yeah.
when they were making this game, Don't Nod pitched this to another company. Like, can you make the main character male instead of female? And they're like, no.
No.
And they pieced out
Yeah.
and they went to Squeenix and it's like, hey, we have this game. Look at it. And they're like, we like this. Here, we'll help you out. And they're like, you don't want us to change anything? It's like, it's your vision. Why should we tell you to change your vision? Which is
Yeah.
something really cool. I don't know how big the team is, but I saw a picture of the team that worked on it. I want to say it was like 30 people,
Yeah.
which like that's by no means a small team, but compared to other games, like I can imagine
yeah.
like any of the studios that work on Call of Duty, because I think there's like 5 at this point, so they can put out a new one every year, is like
Yeah.
crazy, ridiculous big. So it's not a small team, but it's definitely not a large team. It's not an
Yeah.
indie, but it's not a AAA. It's a unique game that was able to exist, which
Yeah.
like some French guy's dream was to make this game, and they made it fairly well.
I don't know what it is. Like there must be something in the water in France, because like they just I don't know if did you ever watch Little Prince with us? Were you there
No,
for that?
but I read that book in my French class.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
read is a strong word. I looked at the words and picked out the
Yeah.
10 I knew.
Well, it's on Netflix still. It's
Isn't it
really,
like kind of
really
like
good movie.
claymation-y looking?
It's the main part is 3D, and then it's stop motion for like when they're telling the story of the Little Prince.
Okay, yeah.
And they like transition really well, and it's got like these great stylized visuals in 3D and 2D, and it's like this really nice like heartfelt story about this little girl like who has to deal with what it means to grow up, and like how you can still be like imaginative as an adult. And it's kind of got the same vibe as this game, because it's very like it's very stylized and just very heartfelt, and it just seems like whenever I think of like something like French made in terms of like media, like so far, this game and this movie, it's like dang, like they must be doing something right over there.
Yeah.
It's
I think it's just
a
like
different
a
mentality.
different culture in general.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
here, like I'm not ripping on any of the games that are made in the U.S. because there are a lot of really cool, unique games that have been made in the U.S. But I think when you have like a different culture, like
Yeah.
either if it's like France or like Montreal or Quebec, like
Yeah.
it's a completely different culture. Well, not completely, but they're a different culture, and I think like what daily life is, or like their perceptions of like what is it like to be a teenage girl in the United States in Oregon. Like
Yeah.
you'll get a completely different story than if you had someone like me writing that story. Like I
Right.
could write a supernatural Oregon tale because that's the only location you can have supernatural stories happen in.
Oh
Which
yeah,
I
like
have,
Gravity Falls.
and also Oxenfree. It's not
Yeah.
blatantly
Oh, that's an Oregon.
well, it's not blatantly stated that it's Oregon, but you can pick up on a lot of clues saying this is Oregon, or like a
Yeah.
little island off of the shore, because the design of the area and all that this seems right.
Yeah.
So, like supernatural things only happen in Oregon, which I'm totally fine with. Like more
yeah.
games should just focus on that. My favorite trope is now blue-haired girls dealing with supernatural things, which is
yeah.
both Life is Strange and Oxenfree.
Well, isn't there what's what's that show that is like the supernatural? Isn't it based in Oregon? It's what Gravity Falls is kind of based off of, like oh, what's it called? Uh, I don't know. It's like, but it's based in like supernatural, like Oregon kind of like,
Yeah.
it's very funny how there's that kind of like,
Well,
that mentality of just like, hey, it's just Oregon, it's just supernatural, because there are a lot of Bigfoot spottings, for example, over there.
oh yeah,
like, it's
there's an
kind of, I
entire
guess, the
game
mentality.
about finding Bigfoot in Oregon.
That's amazing.
It's a 4-player online game where you all work together to try to hunt down Bigfoot. It's incredible.
That's awesome.
So I find like supernatural games with like, because Oregon is a big state. There's a lot of wooded areas, and also like a lot of things is like a lot of Native American tribes in that area, and also going up to British Columbia, like so you can have references to that as well. Another game, like actually in Life is Strange, they mentioned that Blackwell Academy was on like Native American land,
Oh yeah.
probably an Indian burial ground, and that's why weird things happen there.
Oh yeah.
Probably.
Always in the Bear Grove, for sure.
Well, I mean, this entire country is a Native American burial ground at this point.
Pretty much, yeah. Which is
So it's just, I think, because it's kind of like it's like a mysterious area, and also like the whole Oregon Trail, like traveling there, because it seems like such a mystical land, pretty much. So I think
Yeah.
that's why they can focus on like supernatural tales within the area, is because like it just is, at least for where people landed, it was a far off land where
Yeah.
no one else has been. So I think that's why they can do a lot of supernatural things with it.
Yeah, I agree. And getting back to the now that I think about it too, Ubisoft has a French division that is very they're very famous for doing like very stylized games. Like Rayman Legends, for example,
Yep.
was made in Ubisoft's French division, and I think this is Ubisoft, but the game called Outlands, it's like a very stylized Metroidvania platformer. I think it was them. I'm not sure, but if it is, like, it has that same kind of like unique style to it.
Outlands, you said?
Yeah, Outland.
Yes.
I think it's called.
Is it the one with the guy with the sword? Because there's a game called Outlands, and it's Ubisoft, and it has like a guy with cool glowing tattoos and a giant
Yep.
sword.
Yep, that's him.
Yep.
It's a very good game. They really master platforming and stuff. And it seems like it just seems like all these like French games are kind of like they just have this different level of like style and polish to them that, again, like, I wish we saw that more. And that's, again, like why I like Nintendo so much, is like I'm tired of seeing like games that try to be like super realistic and like
Oh yeah.
you got to get that like 4K resolution ground texture, and
Yeah, it's so ridiculous.
yeah, and it's like I understand how you're trying to like make games more realistic because you want to draw in people, but and this is, I think we can kind of go off tangent now that we've talked a lot about Life is Strange, but the thing about Nintendo is like they don't need like a powerful console. Like
Right.
Mario Kart 8, for example, looks super super nice. And if you zoom in, like not everything is a complete like high resolution like sphere. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you zoom in on Yoshi's nose, like he still has, you can see the polygons.
Yeah.
But again, like what makes those games like shine is the lighting and the simple textures. Like it's all really about lighting nowadays because all these engines are using image-based lighting to
Mm-hmm.
kind of get like a really nice like look to them. And I think you style always like replaces graphics. Like the Wind Waker HD, like all they did was just remaster the lighting essentially in the game to make everything not look so flat.
Yeah.
And and it's like that's all you need to do. You don't need like I love I just got Just Cause 3, which looks like super super good. And it's got like very nice realistic graphics, and it's a huge map. Apparently, so my friend and I were looking at the size of game maps. So
Mm-hmm.
this is like interesting example, and so apparently, um, Breath of the Wild is like 20 square miles,
Huh.
which is pretty big. But in comparison, Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag is like 100, which I thought was kind of interesting because it's mostly ocean. And
Right.
Just Cause 3 has the biggest one so far, and it's 400 square miles of. Wait, no, sorry, that doesn't. Does that sound right? 400 square miles? I feel like those numbers might be small. I may be missing some zeros, but like if you look up the top 10 like biggest game maps, like Just Cause 3 is like 20 times that of Breath of the Wild, which is insane. Um,
I mean, it makes sense. It's
yeah,
really just like because a map can be huge but have literally nothing in it.
yeah. I mean, technically, what was that Planet One that just came out?
No Man's Sky.
Yeah, No Man's Sky. Technically, No Man's Sky is literally the biggest, but it's
But who
all
cares about No
procedurally
Man's
generated, so
Sky?
it doesn't really count. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is kind of interesting because like, for Breath of the Wild, like, for example, like at least on the Wii U, you can tell there's a lot of like graphical cuts to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
Like things pop in, even grass pops in as you like walk on it, but it's done very subtly so that it works. And again, I'm sure like I know the Switch obviously looks a lot better on it.
Yeah.
But like it's a good example of like how style I think can always be graphical like powered because I'm pretty sure. Well, I don't know the numbers, but I assume Breath of the Wild is immensely more popular than Horizon Zero Dawn, just because like, it's Zelda, it's stylized, and like, it's more appealing. It's kind of like intimidating. Like anyone can kind of pick up and play it. Like I would be hesitant to pick up Horizon Zero Dawn because I'd be like, whoa, this is a lot of like realistic game mechanic stuff going on versus like, Breath of the Wild. Like it's it's more kind of like um less intimidating. Bodhi is just staring at me right in the face right now. I don't know what
Why
you want,
aren't
dog.
you paying attention to me, Jack?
That's literally the look he's giving me right now.
This,
Come here. Come here, Bodhi. Come here. Come here.
I'm trying to,
Say hi. No, no, no. Don't. Please don't knock over the mic. You can sit there.
it looks you dead in the eye, knocks over it. You did this.
Yeah.
Where
Luckily,
is
he's
it?
not a cat, or he totally would do that. Hi. Hey, how's it going?
See, I can't remember how many copies of Breath of the Wild have been sold because I recently was listening
I think
to
it's like it's actually more than the Switch. Like not even counting the Wii.
Okay, so
I think count
as
the Wii
of
ones.
the beginning of March, Horizon Zero Dawn sold 3.4 million copies.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a decent number. But granted, this I'm not 100% sure on how like good this website, how if it's
Yeah, accurate numbers.
But you're right. Just Cause is 400 square miles.
Yeah, it's
And then
insane.
number 2 was Ghost Recon Wildlands with 170 square miles.
Jeez.
But I agree. Like when it comes to right now, like we've reached a point where like there was a really steady like increase of like quality of graphics in games for a long time, going from like Atari like pixels, and then games died for a bit, and then it came back like with Mario. So you had like and like the NES. So from there we went from pixels to like, so that was like 80s, early 90s right
Yeah.
there, and then like
Yeah.
we were going to like pretty good 3D models like 2000s, you know, and that's a like 20-year increase going from like very simple pixels to like
Yeah.
fairly good 3D models. So we've reached, and then it's just been slowing down because we just need better computers to be able to process
Yeah.
it. Because we can make these people look 100% real. It might be going to the uncanny valley a bit, but like we can make them look so good. But it's just
Yeah.
like our computers will catch on fire. So at this point, our best bet is to make games more stylized because that stands out to people. I remember at E3, there was a game that that was shown. That's not what I wanted. I think it was called. That's also a game. Ooh, I don't remember what it's called, but I want to say, for some reason, I thought it was called The Last Night or Last Night E3. There was a. Oh, here it is. Yeah, here we go. It's called The Last Night. I was right. I was spelling night as in like a knight, like with swords.
Yeah.
So that game is a pixelated like cyberpunk game, but is like using 2D graphics to kind of make a 3D world, not like how Doom and like Castlevania were, where basically it's like here are our planes and we're just gonna kind of make it look 3-dimensional. Like this is literally just like if you were doing like paper art where you had layer of paper over paper over paper to create depth. And it's a very like I remember seeing that game and being like, oh my god, this game looks incredible. Like it stuck out to me because it looked different. It wasn't like the same old like here is another game where you run around shooting things and everything looks hyper realistic. Like I have nothing against those games. I love those games too. But there's something about a game that has a unique style to it that like makes it pop up. Like I remember very few games from E3 and I somehow remember The Last Night.
Yeah.
Spelled night wrong, but you know, I think it really speaks for like why we should have games that are stylized, like Life is Strange or like Borderlands. Like it feels better when you look at an environment and go like, this feels different, but not in a negative way. Like because I'm so tired. I look at real life every day. Let me look at something that looks different for like a hot minute, please.
Yeah, and that's always why I think it's important that kind of games should be rooting back to their origin of like, you know, cartoons. Like cartoons were kind of the first like medium of stylization, which is why it's insane that we're getting a game like Cuphead, you know, because that's like, you know, it's harken back to the good old days of, you know, pure animation and entertainment.
Yeah.
And I think again, like, it's nice that we can like it's a good thing that we're pushing graphics to look more realistic in terms of like lighting and stuff, because that helps the realism.
Oh yeah.
But I think there's definitely a point where those tools should only be used to enhance and not replicate, right? Because again, it's very cool that you can make like you know, dirt look like actual dirt. Like that's all well and good, but like again, you take a game like Breath of the Wild that has literally just bump maps for everything to try and simulate depth and things like that, and you get the sand, and like you look at the sand in the desert, and it's actually pretty low res. You know, it's not super like, you know, like highly detailed. However, like, you know, it's a game that like focuses on stylization, and you know, you don't need a Skyrim-esque level like like you know, look to it. Like it's all simple cell shaders and lighting, and I think in this case technology should be focused more on making like that workflow faster, and for helping things, I don't know, like I guess look more realistic, but also still keep that level of illusion. Because you're right, like you really don't want to dip into the uncanny valley. And I think there are some games who try to like who do get past that a bit. Like Last of Us looks pretty realistic for the most part, and they use motion capture for all the faces and stuff. And motion capture is obviously kind of like a little bit of a um, I guess a risk for making things look a little bit rigid.
Yeah.
Because even though you're trying to make it look like real life humans, like Ruby, for example, use motion capture for a lot of their like talking scenes, and they don't always quite look natural.
Yeah.
I guess you could say, um, which is fine. Like it's understandable for because you don't want to have to key every single frame for every animation. Like I get that.
Oh yeah.
But but yeah, you're right. Like we see all these AAA games coming out, and I think um, I think that's also a reason people like to hold on to the classics. Because if you look at a game like Shovel Knight, like it's like, yeah, here's pixels and cartoon style, and it's not like trying to be like super realistic, and that's kind of what games were originally about. So it's like, if you push that too far, like a good example would be, um, oh, what's it called? I was forgetting. Hold on, I gotta look it up now. It's that game by Ubisoft that they just have a sequel for.
Oh, Beyond Good and Evil.
Yes, Beyond Good and Evil.
Yes,
Thank you.
I'm
That's
so
it.
good at this game.
Yeah, I love the first one. I've only played a couple hours of it, but like I really appreciate like what it is and what it's about. And it has it's like PlayStation 2, so it's got like very simple like well, not simple, but like pretty basic graphics and stuff that's hold up pretty well. And now it looks like the granted it was like a
cinematic
release trailer
trailer.
that dropped, yeah. However, like I don't know if it's like you take a game like that and like it's not. I don't know if it'll be quite the same seeing it like that realistic because like take for example like Metroid Prime, which was like they took the SNES Samus and like turned her into like a 3D um like a 3D representation of Metroid. However, it still kept a very unique like style and like it was like an alien world, so everything was kind of like it looked a little bit more realistic, obviously, but like it wasn't quite like dipping into uncanny valley. Um, and it was a better example of transitioning and kind of keeping a style, whereas like nowadays like all these AAA titles kind of like they blend together almost. Like the new Assassin's Creed that's coming out, the Egypt one.
Oh yeah.
Like I'm sure you're gonna be seeing like 4K resolution sand on everything, but like again,
it's not necessary.
it doesn't really matter, yeah, because it's like you want to be playing a game to escape into a new world, right? It's like what you said. I don't want to look at real life unless you're teaching me, I guess, like why life is kind of like unique. Like that's the whole thing of Life is Strange. It's like, yeah, life is strange. Like we're focusing on little moments and details in every character's life that like matters to them.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna make a game look like real life, like I guess there's not really like a point to it unless you're doing like a VR experience where.
Well, even like VR experiences, you don't even need to go like super like realistic. You just need to make sure it flows correctly. Because you can. I watched a group, Funhouse, do the Star Trek bridge crew simulator.
Yeah.
And like when you look at the other players, they look janky, like they look weird. But I've been in a VR, like used a VR headset, and it was in a very low res like world, like a low poly world. Yeah. And it felt so realistic, despite the fact that the graphics weren't real life. It's just the fact that you felt immersed in this world. So even for VR, like honestly, I was like really go against using like super detailed stuff for VR, just because that would slow things down and more likely to make you sick. Like as long as you kind of make the world you're in like big and like make it like just feel right, doesn't really matter like what the art looks like. They couldn't even probably put you in like what the original Doom looked like. Have you
Yeah.
seen it? It's pretty much it was not at all 3D. It was fake 3D. It's just
Yeah,
like,
yeah, it's
what
like
if we did math and made it like, okay, here's our square, but maybe look like this? It's all
yeah.
faked. And you could like put someone in a VR headset and put them in that world, and they'll be like, that was the most realistic thing I've ever dealt with in my entire life.
Yeah, and yeah, kind of building on that too. Like I really appreciate like how older games like that used to like get around problems. Like for example, um, back during the PlayStation age, like pre-rendered backgrounds were a common thing. Like I think Final Fantasy VII
Mm-hmm.
had to do that for a lot of their stuff, and like I know games have been doing this before, but I like the idea of like or here's actually a better example, but in Jack and Daxter, which was one of, if not the first 3D platformers to have no loading times between worlds, like it was all seamless.
Right.
And granted, they would kind of distract, like if you were like um, taking a boat to this one island, like it would have a couple of shots of you riding the boat, which is kind of like, but it wasn't a loading screen, you know, like it was just kind of like a transition.
Yeah.
And the way they actually did that sometimes was they actually had a special tripping animation if you tried to go to like a place that didn't load in time.
Mm-hmm.
So like the game would actually like stop you and have you like stumble while it like loaded the thing. So like
Oh.
it is very interesting how like they had to find creative solutions to like um, back when they didn't have the technology, just like we'll just throw money at it until the technology works, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think I definitely appreciate that versus like nowadays it just seems like how can we get our processors to not incinerate while we like try to make this world bigger, you know?
Yeah.
It's more kind of like how do we just compress everything? Well, and even so, they don't compress it. Like if you've seen some of the games on AJ's Xbox One, it's like freaking 50 gigabytes up to like 80 or
Oh
something.
yeah, it's ridiculous the size.
Like
of some
no one
games.
compresses anything anymore because like all our storage is so big. Well, save for like the Wii U. You know what the Switch storage is? What that default comes with? By the way,
Switch.
it's all like 64 gigs or something.
It's easy enough to look up. It has 32 gigs of internal memory, and then you can expand it with like up to 256 with a micro SD card.
Oh, okay, cool.
I immediately bought a micro SD card, but I didn't get one that big because SD cards that size cost so much money.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And like, I mean, personally, I get only like indie games, like digitally.
Yeah, so you don't need like
and those
huge stuff.
typically do not like take up a lot of room,
hmm
which is nice. So,
Yeah.
like, yeah, no, I remember having to quickly download Doom onto my laptop for my level design class, and it was like, this is gonna take 2 hours. And I'm like, what? And it was like 60 gigs or something like that. I'm like, I want you to go in the corner, Doom, and think about what you're doing to my poor computer right now.
Yeah.
As I turn on the super fan, you've heard the super fan on my computer. Everyone thinks it's dying when I turn that on.
Yeah, my laptop was kind of doing the same thing with the thing when trying to process games like that. And again, I'm gonna use a game like Overwatch for example of how to do graphics and style right, because so I was always playing it on the lowest settings when I have this PC I'm using here, right, which has like 8 gigabytes of RAM, and it has an integrated Intel HD graphics card,
Oh, jeez.
which basically means it sucks.
It means
because,
the computer might catch on fire. Something.
Yeah, and because everything has to be NVIDIA. And when I switched to my new laptop, which I actually just returned and hopefully we'll get back soon, but like it looked like a whole new game playing on like epic settings. Like it's crazy, just the amount of detail and lighting. However, the low settings going back isn't that much of a draw because the game is both stylized and like really nice looking at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
Not saying that like stylization can't be nice, but I mean just like when it's low res, it still looks good.
Mm-hmm.
Even compared to like high resolution, which is just like the lighting's better and there's more texture detail. But like even playing the games on the lowest settings, like that's a great example of just like making it for both sides. Like Skyrim looks like absolute trash if you have it on lowest settings.
I
Like
think it looks
the
like
texture
trash
detail is awesome.
regardless, but that's a personal
Yeah,
opinion with the engine that they use for
yeah, but
Skyrim.
well, the thing about Bethesda's engine in that scenario is that like the game functions well and like it has a nice like flow to it. Like I feel like all Bethesda games, like the first Dishonored, for example, like everything feels nice, but the textures and like the level of detail is never really like
Good.
quite right. Like all the bump maps in Skyrim are super ugly. Like they
Oh
all look
god.
terrible. And granted, you can mod everything now to make it look better. But even like I tried, even the high settings was the first thing I did when I got my new computer. Like it just looks terrible.
Oh yeah.
And a game like granted it is a kind of an older game. It was what like 2012 or something like that. I want to say 13 maybe. It's pretty old. It's like 6 years old now. I think maybe 2012.
2011 November. So, yeah,
Yeah.
2012.
So it's pretty old, and they're still milking it right now. Like I don't know, like who's gonna buy it on the Switch? Like,
I
sure, it'll
certainly
be
not.
cool. It'd be cool for mobile Skyrim, but like, come on, just give us a new one already.
Yeah, that's what I honestly thought at their press conference. They were finally going to announce, like, hey, we're making new Skyrim, and everyone will, like, lose their mind. It's like, nope, Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim, we're going to keep milking that. And people are like, oh, please
And
stop.
even the online was like, the online version is not really what everyone wants.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just interesting to see like what all these companies like are trying versus what the populace wants, because like I'm pretty sure open world Breath of the Wild kind of came out of nowhere, because the Skyward Sword's problem was that it was too linear, and I don't know, like I find it really funny that they just went from that to like there's just probably an executive board meeting. It was like,
What if
oh,
we
the
made
game's too linear.
Skyrim?
What are we gonna do? Like, what if we just made it open world? And they're just like, what do you mean? And it's like, yeah, you can. And no one was buying it at first. I remember because like, and by buying I mean like believing
Oh,
it,
yeah.
because like when they first showed it like 2 years ago at E3 or a year ago, whatever, probably a
It's
year ago
probably a
because
year
it kept
ago,
getting
because that's
delayed.
like,
Yeah,
they don't really show anything until basically it's almost done.
yeah, but like when they showed the previews, it was like chugging along on the Wii U, even just like normally, and everyone's
Oh,
just
yeah.
like, ooh, I don't know about this. But I'm still impressed with like how well it runs.
Oh, yeah,
Granted, there's some
definitely.
slowdown when you fight enemies and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But I've seen AJ play the Switch version, and it's like, whoa,
The
this
Switch
is like pretty
version
intense.
is incredible. Just because I can put it on the TV, I can have it handheld, and like
Yeah.
it plays the same, which makes sense because like when you're in the dock mode, it's literally just you're projecting it onto the TV, so it's not like how everyone thought
Yeah.
the base would be like, oh, it's gonna have extra processors to make it like super duper, but it still looks good. Like playing any game on this handheld version looks incredible.
Yeah.
Granted, it will not fix Skyrim's problem. I have a lot of issues with Skyrim, mostly because it's a super, super open world game, and I get lost really easily. And then I
Yeah.
start 30 quests, get more lost, and go, I don't feel like doing this anymore. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and everything about like Skyrim is kind of like um the outside world is kind of like an illusion in terms of like stuff around, because everything in Skyrim that you find in the world is like separately loaded, like in terms of dungeons and
Yeah.
like towns and stuff. So it's like everything outside the world is kind of boring versus like Breath of the Wild, where like every time you go off the beaten path, like you're likely to find something
oh yeah.
that like distracts you, but like in a good way, like
Oh yeah, no.
something that like is interesting or interactable, not like
I'm
here's
hopelessly
more
lost.
trees like you've seen. Yeah, and what I like too is yeah, this is I guess becoming more of a Breath of the Wild discussion, which is fine. But
And me ripping on Skyrim, but that's
yeah,
fine.
which yeah, is important stuff. Is that the change in environment is very impressive too, because it's a game that's only like 20 square miles, is actually like not really that big when you compare it to the world.
Yeah.
I guess probably the size of like, there are countries I think smaller than that, obviously, but like the game's transition from like environments is really impressive because there's a desert, there's a volcano, there's a tundra, there's like a rainforest. Like it's actually like interesting and diverse. Whereas like Skyrim is either like it's like cold up north and it's slightly warmer down south. That's kind of like the only big difference geographically.
Mm-hmm.
And again, once you play it for so long, it's like you start getting bored of the same trees and the same towns. And again, like I've been playing. I restarted Breath of the Wild just for the DLC. Now that they have the hero path mode,
Yeah, just to
which
see.
is such a nice touch because like you can see like where you haven't gone now,
That's
and it
pretty
makes it
cool.
more like, yeah, it gives you more options to see like where you can try to find stuff. Which again is how open world should be because it doesn't really matter how big your map is. Like if there's nothing to like see from it,
Mm-hmm.
like No Man's Sky problem.
Yeah, and also when you have an open world game and you have towns in them, you kind of want the towns to feel actually real. Like these aren't just people placed here because I felt like it. It's like, oh no, this is where they lived. This is what they
Yeah,
do every day. Like in Breath of the Wild, you go at night and people are actually sleeping, or like some people are up. Like you have a different guard out for like a night shift, and I like stuff like that just because it doesn't feel like, oh, I just found this conveniently placed town here. Like
yeah,
with Skyrim, a lot of it doesn't feel like it's a real area. It's like kits that they have for like pieces. They just put them together, plop it in, and
yeah,
go, "This is good." Um,
yeah,
which kind of brings us back to. I'm gonna bring us back to Life is Strange for a moment because I really want to talk about like just the layout of the areas.
hmm
Just because like the school felt like a school. You
yeah.
walked around, there were
It did.
classrooms, there were lockers, there were bathrooms, there were graffiti in places. Like it felt, or like and graffiti on tables. You looked like you see trash around. So it's not just like, oh well, here is a school, and that's it. We're gonna put people here. It actually felt like
Yeah,
this is a school that's been around for a while and has seen many teenagers and their tendency to put graffiti on everything.
right.
It was just like a lot of games have that issue of making their areas feel like an actual lived-in area or an
Yeah,
actual like this real life for a moment. Like I don't care if how good the graphics are. I just want like if I go into an area, I want to make sure like see if this area has history in it with like a little
right.
bit of garbage, a little bit of like little knickknacks around if you go to someone's room, posters. Like and I feel like when you take time to do details like that, no matter what the game is, it really helps sell like this world you've created for it.
hmm
So
Yeah, I definitely agree.
like Breath of the Wild does that fairly well. Like you go to like little towns and like you see people doing things. They walk around. Like at certain times they'll be in certain places. And
Yeah,
I find that to be kind of cool just because like it's so easy. It's like this person will stay here 24 hours a day. You can literally just have your character stand there in front of them and like nothing will change. But here it's like, oh, they're not. You go in different times of the day and they'll be gone. It's
yeah,
like, oh, they went to bed because it's midnight.
yeah. And what's even more impressive is like the dialogue trees for all the NPCs is like crazy.
Oh yeah.
Like there's some of the not like the more major ones, like how you if you don't have any clothes on, a lot of them will like comment on the fact that you're not wearing
I
clothes.
love that.
If you yeah, if you stand on the tables of a lot of the merchants, like they tell you to get down, and it's crazy too because um like when Danielle and I were playing when we first got to like the town with the laboratory,
Right.
like the cool hillside town, which
Oh, yeah.
I love. It's my favorite town.
That was great.
So nice looking. Yeah, but like people when you get the flame, like the blue flame, like people have like separate like
Oh yeah,
dialogues
they
for
ask
like,
you about
oh
it.
you're carrying the blue flame now. Like no one feels just like they don't have a purpose. Like there are people like with the quest that feel genuine. Like people are just kind of like, doing their own thing. All the shopkeepers like super like enthusiastic and like again like it just I've never seen like NPCs like so lively in that game. Whereas like with Skyrim, it's just like it's the same 6 voice actors for every single character.
And then
it's always like
they break.
it's always the same looking character, yeah. And it's like that's why everyone like mods the hell out of it because like everything is kind of boring and looks the same and all the things are the same. Whereas like Breath of the Wild, like they obviously like reused assets for like the shrines and stuff, but like it's done in a way where it's so stylized and unique that like all the characters feel like they're genuine people. I like how you can save some of them like out in the world, like trying to fight like mobs and stuff like that, or moblins or whatever they're called. And again, it's just a very good example of how like your style and your attention to detail can make a game like really shine. Which also roots back to Life is Strange because there is a ton of detail in the environment design, like you were saying, with all the houses you go to in Chloe's room and the school. And I really like how all the pictures are like painted.
When
you look at them.
I like that a lot.
Like, yeah, like and like all the when you go to like the laptop and you look at stuff, like everything is kind of like it's a painted picture. Like, it's just
I find that
it's a really nice touch.
Yeah, they continue with that like art style of like all our textures are painted.
Yeah, it's a very very nice touch, and again, design choices like that go a long way, which is why I think it's important to keep that in mind with a lot of these open world style games. Whereas, obviously Life is Strange isn't open world, but there are a lot of areas that you can go and explore.
Yeah.
And I like how they leave it kind of there's never like a rush to like get stuff done, which is kind of cool. Like I like how you can take your time to look around and comment on stuff, which again is something you don't often see in a game in a while. And Max's inner dialogue or inner monologue rather for like looking and thinking about stuff is also a very like I think a nuanced way of explaining your environment and your characters without like just dialogue dumping all the information on us, because again it's more effective to be like to walk past someone, press the look button and just be like, oh, there's David, like he's doing this and this and he's like this. Like everything that Max says feels very like she's lived this school, she knows like these people and what they are and who they are. And again, that kind of like third person experience is a very effective way of like establishing your character. And you don't always have to have like narrative to drive that. Again, with Breath of the Wild, there's good examples. Link doesn't talk. Everyone talks to him, and yet Life is Strange does kind of the not the opposite, but people talk to you and explain things to you and you interact with them, and it's nice seeing like not a silent protagonist anymore who's just kind of there to be talked to. Because it makes conversations feel more two-sided, obviously, now that you have Max, who has this like her character very well, and like what she'll say and how she'll react to different scenarios, even if it's not all predictable. But like again, it's with the characters and the style and environment design, like it's a very impressive game in terms of how like believable they make you feel the world is, which also hardens back to Breath of the Wild's example of like building a world and crafting a world. And Nintendo and Square Enix are both very good at doing that, and both Japanese companies, so there's something of that too. But you're right, even though Square Enix published it, so not quite the same, but still.
But they know like what they're looking for, like
they obviously had some direction in terms of how it went,
or like they could have said, nah, we don't want this, but they looked at a game being like, this fits into kind of like our own personal beliefs of what games should have. So I think that was
for sure
like kind of a good sign, because even though they weren't like directly involved in making the game like as much as Don't Nod was, they saw it as like, this is a game that like we wouldn't made the exact same game, but it would be a game like similar to something we would create, which is kind of cool.
And I think that's the popularity of a lot of games like what was I thinking of? Level 5 does a really good job. Like they do Dragon Quest 8 and Ni no Kuni, which
Oh
I think are
yeah.
both very good examples of games with they're pretty big open worlds. They're not enormous by any scale,
Oh yeah.
but what I like about them is every character and place you go has some sort of like well, mostly in the towns for like Dragon Quest and for Ni no Kuni, because the open world is kind of just like a place to just transition from things.
Mm-hmm.
But when you go into like a town and all these characters are like they have their own little stories and animations, and um, I think they also do the Tales of games, if I remember right. I think Aoi talked about that, which are very popular because like their characters are very like well, most of them. I don't know how like most of those games work, but Level 5 is very good also at doing those kinds of like world building and character development. So anything you ever find with them is definitely worth checking out. Debating on getting Ni no Kuni 2 for
Yeah, I'm interested
when it
in
comes
that.
out.
That's so. Level 5 actually didn't do the Tales of series. It was someone else. But Level 5 did do the Professor Layton games.
Oh yeah, those are yeah. I heard those are pretty good too.
I played one and I was stuck on a puzzle for one puzzle for like 3 years. I put the game away. I came back to it. Finally figured out that was the last puzzle of the game.
Oh,
And then the
really?
game was
Dang.
over. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I thought there was more. But yeah, like they have really in those games. I remember Professor Layton had interesting interactions with characters and like kind of building this world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this has been
Looks
nice
like
building worlds.
yeah. Hold on, go ahead. What are you saying?
So it's nice when you have a company that actually like or like a studio that looks and is like we're actually going to take time to just not like here is our storyline, but then they kind of like put like a nice little buffer around it for like the world for it, like to give it some history, to give it some other parts of it, just so it doesn't feel like this world just spawned into existence right this moment.
Yeah.
So that's like a lot of games like have a lot of deep lore into it. Like World of Warcraft has a lot of lore into it. And lore is
Yeah.
pretty much like the history of like everything that's happened here. And then like a lot of people will kind of mistake like lore for like culture of an area
Yeah.
cuz like
Well, most of it's like flavor text. I feel like for games like that, though.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's there, but it's not always like believable / important.
Yeah.
For this, like the crafting of it. But yeah.
yeah, like if you do lore right, like you kind of like realize like oh this area has a deep history. But a lot of people will kind of use like, oh well, we have a deep history, so we don't need to really define anything else. But you kind of need to define like what is the culture of this area. Like Breath of the Wild does that in areas, so you can really tell like what their traditions are in this area, like their connections with like certain things. Like it's really nice because a lot of games don't really take time to do that. Like I forget the one city, the one where like men aren't allowed in.
Oh yeah, the Garuda Town.
Yeah. See,
Yeah.
there we go. That's an awesome example of culture in this area.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, they did a good job with all the species and stuff.
so a lot of games don't really take time to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. It looks like we're almost at the 2-hour mark, so I feel like this would be a good time to wrap it up so I can
Yeah.
edit some of this.
Yeah, I can make the little logo.
So any final thoughts, I guess, about Life is Strange that we want to wrap up real quick, or
I just say like it was a really good episodic game, and I kind of wish I experienced it when it was coming out as an episodic game, because that would have been a completely different experience than the experience that I had with it, which is kind
Yeah.
of cool when a game can give you two different experiences, where from the time you're waiting for chapter to chapter to just kind of like going through the entire thing. It had its bugs, but it has very interesting characters, like believable interactions with people, and yeah, I feel sorry for Nathan, honestly.
yeah,
He needs help, like a lot of help. And it kind of makes sense that he would drift towards Jefferson. But the fact that he wasn't in Jefferson's class with us, so it doesn't really make the connection that he cares about Jefferson at all. So
Yeah,
that was my one
I
issue.
agree.
Like if he was clearly in the class with us, I would be like, oh, he's in class with us. I mean, sure, he might have a different period class with him, but it would have kind of made that connection feel a little more realistic. Be like, oh, like
Hmm.
he's clearly there, or instead of seeing like Victoria talking to him after class, I see Nathan talking to him after class.
Right.
So there was like
Yeah.
some things that could have been improved on, but every game is like that. Not every game is perfect. It's impossible to have a perfect game because everyone will find one thing that they don't like about it. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, yeah, that pretty much accurately describes what I was going to sum up too. So, yeah, thanks for listening to our podcast. For those who are still listening at this point, it's been kind of long and kind of deviated, but
we have a
we
lot of
appreciate
feelings.
if you listened all the way through. Even if you are just having it on the background, it always helps. But yeah, so that was our second episode. Hopefully, we can do some more of these, and we'll see you guys pretty soon. Hopefully.